could live, why in the world would we reintroduce that voluntarily into our society? And I think maybe the emphasis should not be on unanimity of speech and unanimity of thought. Maybe the emphasis should be on learning how to discuss things with people with whom you disagree and still be friends. Because, you know, we, the American people, are not each other's enemies. The people who are trying to divide us are the enemies. And unfortunately, they've been very successful in dividing our society. And we have a war on virtually everything. And people are afraid to express themselves. And, you know, if you've read the book Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky, the 13 rules, first rule is, you know, you make other people think you have more power than you do. You make them think that what they believe, what the majority believe, is archaic. Nobody thinks that way. And what you think is the only thing that intelligent people think. That way, they'll shut up. The majority will shut up. They won't say anything. They'll be intimidated. And, you know, they really don't care whether you agree with them or not, as long as you keep your mouth shut. That is the key. Making people afraid so that they keep their mouth shut, and that way you can drive the agenda. And that's what they've been doing. The minority has actually been driving the agenda for quite some time in our country and making the decisions of what's popular because they've been able, in large part, to gain control of the media and you know, get into pertinent political positions, universities where indoctrination can occur, but the indoctrination is occurring even at lower levels now. Some of you probably remember seeing an article about the school system in Lincoln, Nebraska, where they told the teachers not to refer to the pupils as boys and girls, because somebody might have gender identity and be confused. I mean, it sounds like a skit from Saturday Night Live, but I mean, this is where we have come as a society. Absolute absurdity. It's like cartoon characters. We're so ridiculous. And you know, it's really something that we need to emphasize, that it's okay to disagree with people. And I always say if two people agree about everything, one of them isn't necessary. So, and I think everybody's necessary, so we just stop it. That's the bottom line. Well, you know, there were a lot of problems in terms of me realizing my dream of becoming a physician. Not the least of which was the fact that, you know, my parents got divorced early on. That was devastating. And my mother only had a third grade education. She was from a huge rural family in Tennessee, got married at age 13. Some years later discovered her husband was a bigamist, and had the responsibility of trying to raise us by herself in the inner city. And she wisely moved to Boston to live with her older sister and brother-in-law, typical tenement, large multi-family dwelling, boarded up windows and doors, sirens, gangs, murders. Both of my older cousins, who we adored, were killed. I remember seeing people lying on the ground with bullet holes. I remember our favorite drug dealer when he got killed. We used to like the drug dealers because they brought us candy. You know? It was cool. But the thing that probably impressed me the most were the roaches. They had large, aggressive roaches. In the more upscale areas, they call them water bugs, but we know they were. I mean, not only would they crawl on your table, they would crawl in your cereal box. So if you were eating Raisin Bran, you had to know what those brown things were. Yeah, I probably shouldn't say that since I'm on the Kellogg board, but you know. But while we were enjoying that environment, my mother was out working extraordinarily hard, 2, 3 jobs at a time, leaving at 5 in the morning, getting back after midnight. Why? Because she didn't want to be on welfare. She was very observant, only had a 3rd grade education, but she noticed most of the people she saw go on welfare never came off of it. And she didn't want to be dependent, and she didn't want us to be dependent. So she figured she would just work as long and as hard as was necessary in order to be able to maintain her independence. And we never... The interesting thing about her is she never felt sorry for herself, which is a good thing. The problem is she never felt sorry for us either. So, there was never an excuse that we could make that was satisfactory. She would always say, "Do you have a brain?" And if the answer was yes, then you could have thought your way out of it. And that was probably the most important thing she did for us. Because if people won't accept your excuses, pretty soon you stop looking for excuses. And what a difference that makes. But, a lot of people have been critical of me. They've said, you were poor, you grew up poor, you must have had some kind of government assistance. And my mother did occasionally accept some food stamps, but for the most part, she remained independent. And they said, but you, Ben Carson, want to withdraw the safety nets. I don't want to withdraw the safety nets. I don't know where they get this crap. But what I do want to do is withdraw the mechanisms that create dependency in our society. That really is not helpful to anyone. And that really does them a great disservice. That was one of the things I talked about when I was here the week before last at Al Sharpton's National Action Network conference. And a lot of conservatives were critical of me. They said, "You can't go and talk to those people. That's just don't do it. You can't be associated with that man." But I wasn't really going to talk to Al Sharpton. I was going to talk to the audience. And when he introduced me, he said, Carson and I don't agree on anything. In fact, I don't think we could agree that today is Wednesday. But we should listen to what he has to say. And they were very, very, very cool, very reserved at the beginning. Bring this guy in here to talk to us. He's a pariah, But as I began to talk about dependency versus independence, and how do people create wealth within their own communities by turning dollars over, and how do they reach back and bring others along as they improve, and the detrimental results of out-of-wedlock births because they stop that woman's education and send her children into poverty where they're likely to end up in welfare or in the penal system. And I gave a history lesson. I talked about all the contributions that black people have made to the development of this nation, much of which was shocking to them. And by the time I finished, this reserved audience gave me a standing ovation. I could barely get out of the room. Everybody wanted pictures and handshakes. And Al Sharpton was like, "What is going on?" Which just proves that we're not going to accomplish anything by getting in our respective corners and throwing hand grenades at each other. The only way we're going to accomplish things is if we're willing to engage in dialogue. Because when we engage in dialogue, we're able to lay out the reasons for our beliefs. And we invite others to lay out the reasons for theirs. Now, the left usually doesn't have any good reasons,